I'm here just for a change, not representing Neotel, despite the orange color. And I'm going to talk to you today about the biggest ever cable system to land in sub-Saharan Africa. Just before I get onto the detail of the presentation, just a couple of little facts about it. You know, everybody always claims that theirs is the biggest ever and that theirs is the most amazing project. But let me just give you a couple of little statistics which might give you a sense of the scale of this project. If you look at the scale of the fiber network itself, depending on whose numbers you use, we're around 17 or 18,000 kilometers of route length on this cable. But we've also got a 4 fiber pair cable. So if you take the fiber pairs inside WACS and you string them end to end, what we have in effect is a cable, a fiber length that goes 3 times around the world. That might give you a sense of the scale of this project. I'm going to give you some more statistics. There's another one which I rather like, which is not something you often see when you're measuring submarine cables, which is the total weight of the cable that's been put into the sea is roughly 20 A380s. And remember, we had to put that on ships and carry it to where it had to be. So that might give you a sense of scale. But let me tell you just a little bit about the WACS project itself. Firstly, we called it the West Africa Cable System precisely because it really is a major cable for West Africa. That's not to say that it's not serving Southern Africa as well, but if you look at the continent as a whole, over the last few years, we've gone slowly backwards in West Africa, while East Africa has had dramatic improvements. So the West Africa Cable System was a necessary next step. We view it as the most important submarine cable system in West and Southern Africa in the last 10 years, the last one being SAT3. It's also significant because for a number of countries, this is the first time they've ever been connected. So specifically, Togo, the DRC, Republic of Congo, or Congo-Brazzaville, and Namibia, surprisingly, are being connected to submarine cables for the first time. Those of you who have been to countries that don't have submarine cables will know just how significant that is. It's a huge step for those countries. For some other countries, it's not such a huge step, but for South Africa, for example, the step that we're seeing is a dramatic improvement in 2 things. One is bandwidth. Everybody knows that. But the one which is often forgotten is reliability. So landing in South Africa, we now have 5 submarine cable systems. 5 is about the point where you can start to claim that a network is 100% available. With less than 5 systems, you're still sitting with some probability of failure. So South Africa as a country is getting to the point where we can claim to be fully connected all the time to the world. Total investment of $650 million. And just a point about the consortium model, we have been tackled on a few occasions, particularly in the South African market, about, isn't just this the big guys getting together and forming a club again? That may be a valid point, that it is a club to build a cable. But put that in perspective. Some of the smallest investors here, some of the countries that have invested through even their national operators, have invested at much smaller fractions of that number. I can't give you the exact numbers for each operator, but we're talking about figures that are 1/20th of that size. And for 1/20th of that investment, an entire country gets a submarine cable. So that puts the consortium model in perspective. Private cables are great if you've got that kind of money, but consortium models really make submarine cables affordable, particularly for smaller operators and particularly for countries which don't have the ability to invest. It's about 14,500 kilometers end to end. That's excluding the branches. And importantly, we have connected essentially Cape Town and London. It lands a bit north of Cape Town in Azersfontein, and we chose the other end to be London, not to be some landing station outside London. So we've taken it right into London precisely because it gives us an advantage. Design capacity 5.12 terabits per second. This is also one of those numbers that gets bandied about. Actual provision capacity, or the lit capacity today, is about 1/10 of that. So we've lit about 1/10 of the cable. We've got a lot of headroom to go. And as everybody knows, as you start equipping with different technologies, even that number starts moving. We've chosen a 4 fiber pair system, and I'll explain that a little later. We use GMPLS effectively switching wavelengths using GMPLS as the protocol as a way to do protection on this cable. That is a significant step. That makes it very different from what we've seen in other cables before. Many cables, and in fact particularly some of the cables landing in southern Africa, are built as a ring configuration. The challenge you have with a ring configuration on a submarine cable is that the faults that occur on submarine cables typically happen on the landing spurs. So in other words, the actual section of cable that comes onto dry land is where your biggest problem is. It's where anchors will catch the cable. It's where you're going to have potentially high fault levels. One of the things that we've been able to do because of the architecture of WACS, because we've built it not as a ring, but actually as a tree, it's a mesh architecture internally in the cable. We have a single span of fiber, a single express route that runs from Cape Town, or effectively outside Cape Town, to Portugal, and a second single hop that goes from Portugal into the UK. What that means is that any of the branches in between can fail without losing that backbone. And then we have GMPLS and switching of the wavelengths across 4 separate fiber pairs that effectively form a tree, which I'll show you now. And then finally, just to acknowledge our supplier, we've had very good support from the supplier. Our challenges in this build have not really been around the supply side, and they haven't really been around the investors. Our biggest challenges in this system have been things like environmental impact, the actual process and regulatory process in some countries, and just the challenges of working in some countries which have never had submarine cables before. So what does the cable look like? That's the build of the cable. Just for complete accuracy, all of those branches are live, with the exception of the DRC branch where we are going live in the next couple of months, but all the others actually are live and lit. And the important thing about this cable is that if you look at the countries we've landed in, and you look at the players that we're landing with, in most cases, we're not in fact landing with incumbents. So this is not like SAT3. This is not an old-fashioned incumbent cable with a cozy club between all the incumbents. In South Africa alone, as you'll see, we have 5 players, which I'll show you shortly. So here's the list of players. And I'm just going to go through briefly and give you a sense of the players here, to give you a sense of the landscape, because this is what makes the commercial difference in a cable like this. Firstly, let's start with Angola Cables. Angola Cables is a joint venture formed from multiple operators in the Angolan market. Multiple operators have invested. They've all put money behind it. So just typically that includes Angola Telecoms, it includes Unitel, it includes Startel in Angola. All of them have put money into it, and as a result, they're all able to compete selling capacity into Angola. Now, in the Angolan market, for any of you who know the Angolan market, that is absolutely unique. Secondly, we have Broadband Infraco representing the South African government investment, and there's been a lot of talk about what impact that's going to have on some big projects. Hopefully we win the SKA, and that's part of the plan. Cable and Wireless Worldwide, whom everybody knows. You might want to call them Vodafone shortly. Cabo Verde Telecom, which is the national operator in Cape Verde. Congo Telecom in Congo, Brazzaville. The MTN Group. And if you look at a number of countries, so if you look at Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, those are all countries where MTN is landing the cable. But please note, MTN might be the landing party, but the cable is open access. So in each of those countries, and this is a fundamental shift, in each of those countries, for the first time, we're seeing actual competitive sale of international capacity into those markets. Portugal Telecom in Portugal, Tata Communications and Neotel, we're effectively 2 halves of the same coin, if you know that we're essentially majority owned by Tata. Telecom Namibia jointly with BTC, Botswana, just in case you didn't think they had submarine cables in Botswana. Telkom South Africa, Togo Telecom, SCPT in the DRC, which is the national operator there, the Vodacom Group, which is obviously as a South African player, but also Vodafone Spain, the other half of Vodafone, that's landing in the Canary Islands in particular. So here's that architecture I was showing you, so the techies can start to figure out what happens. You can see that what we have effectively is a very resilient mesh architecture. If you unravel this, you'll find that there are multiple ways to get around failures. So we can lose a branch, we can lose a fiber, we can lose a repeater. We can lose various things and maintain the maximum possible availability of services. So, for example, out of any one landing station in the middle, there are at least 2 routes out, and in many cases on 2 separate fiber pairs. So there are multiple ways around failures on the cable, which, as we know, are the big issues. And importantly, round-trip delay, 138.5 milliseconds. That is not just an effect of the length of the cable. It's partly just the effect of the length of the cable, but also with the technology we're using, that's at its absolute minimum because of the DWDM backbone that we're using. So we now have a round-trip delay, and this is measured Azefontein to Highbridge. That's landing station South Africa, landing station UK, straight fiber, no kinks, no drop-offs in between, straight route, here to there, 138.5. And I'm reliably informed by Telkom that when SAT3 is decommissioned, which won't be too long from now, SAT2 is decommissioned, then we will have the shortest time. SAT2 is a little bit shorter, but let me put this in perspective for you. SAT2 was built in, any guesses here? 92, 93 is when it was commissioned. So 1993, SAT2 is 1/10,000th of the size of WACS. 1/10,000th of the size. So if you're adding up bandwidths in South Africa, SAT2 unfortunately doesn't really rate. But the point is that technology over that less than 20-year time span, we've seen a 10,000 times increase in bandwidth. Okay, so a little bit about the project for those of you who are keen to build submarine cables. We started the whole process. We actually started the process in late 2008. It took us about 7 months to get to the CNMA signature, which we think is a record. And in that 7 months, we got to the point of signing both a CNMA, construction and maintenance agreement, and a supply contract. Took us 474 days to do the initial basic planning and subplant manufacture. We started the cable lay, the actual physical cable lay started in 2010, mid-2010, and took us about a year to lay the cable, which is about right. And since then, we've been working on installing, commissioning, etc. About another year to complete that. So on the whole, almost exactly 3 years to the day, and we have a cable. And last Friday, or 2 Fridays back, on the 11th of May, we launched live, and we have a live cable, and there's quite a lot of bandwidth already provisioned. Anybody interested, just talk to any one of the companies on that list. Just a quick look at the architectures and what it does for us. One of the things about this cable is that it is a lot more in line with today's cable systems than, for example, the historical cables like SAT3. So we're able to do things like direct wavelength access. We're able to do direct Ethernet onto the cable. All the parties, including any other landing party who has a license in a territory, can connect directly into the cable. So without going through national incumbents, without going through all kinds of complicated cross-connects, it looks much more like a private cable than like a consortium cable from the point of view of those accessing it. And that also means that the onward routing is much easier. So the owners in the cable can all use it anywhere they like, any way they like, and land it with any licensed carrier in any territory. That is unique amongst consortium cables. Based on that, we then have onward routing to the US. 2 obvious hop-off points for that. The one is Seychelles in Portugal, which is a Tata landing station, and Highbridge in UK, which is the other Tata landing station. Those 2 give access by the shortest route to the Americas. The shortest route into London, obviously, is direct. And then into Europe, there are plenty of routes into Europe, also out of Portugal and the UK. And remember, these are all effectively open access places. In fact, in the UK, we're actually in Global Switch. We're in a carrier-neutral data center. We're not even in a landing station. And obviously, out of Portugal, we get to quite a lot of other places. And out of South Africa, with the 5 cables we have in South Africa, there are lots of different places we can get to now. Moving on, just a little bit of some pictorial stuff to show you a little bit about the cable. So we have some nice landing stations. We thought we'd give you some photographs of the nice ones. Some people have built quite nice-looking palaces. Others have built small huts, but they're all quite nice. We thought Togo was the sort of prettiest architecturally. Don't know why, but they're quite. Each of these is complete now. We haven't got a full set of photos yet. We're still kind of collecting all the pictures, and that's the remainder. Okay, so in summary, the first submarine cable between Western Europe, Western Southern Africa for over 10 years. Yes, there are some cables that land up in Northwest Africa, but this is the first one that comes all the way down, crosses the equator and joins South Africa to Europe with hop-offs in between. Provides access to a high-capacity route directly into a carrier-neutral POP in London, which is turning out to be quite popular. International capacity, obviously we are now the big guys in terms of cable capacity in Southern and West Africa. We're providing diversity for other cables, and I think increasingly that's where the pressure is going to come, is on the diversity, because with WACS being so much bigger than the other cables in the region, the other cables need to now catch up. And upgradable to 5.12 terabits per second. And just obviously using the latest technologies. We do have 40 gigabits per second on some segments. So particularly on the portion between Portugal and the UK, we have 40 gigabit per second lambdas. But the whole cable system is potentially upgradable to 40 gigs across the whole cable system eventually. Right, what I'm going to do now is just want to show you a couple of awards from one of the partner conferences here. Last year, we were recognized as the best cable project, and we've had a couple of other awards as a really big African project.
Stefan Chenard, Euroconsult. There's a few countries that choose not to get landing stations. Presumably they got the invite. What was their reason? Were they properly served by other cables? Was it a question of the price of the ticket? Was it regulation? Can you tell us a few stories?
Yeah, there were a number of countries approached. I can't give you much detail about the background of who chose to come in and who chose to come out. There are possibly multiple reasons. I think what certainly further up the western bulge of Africa, there are additional cable systems. So north of Nigeria, there's certainly Glow One, Main One, and ACE on the northern section. So I suspect there's been more competition up there. So yeah, there were a number of countries approached that didn't join. But the other thing which is important is to understand that the players involved have targeted markets where they're present. So if you look at the list of players, they obviously, it's very much tied to markets where those players have presence. But there were other players invited who didn't join.